Hey guys, and welcome back to day 7 of my 10-day algebra series. Today we're going to be looking at these 3 different forms of linear equations and how to graph them. Starting with our slope-intercept, just like the name says, this is going to give us our slope and our y-intercept. So that constant or number that is by itself is your y-intercept, so where it crosses that y-axis. So if we're looking at this example of our graph down below and we're trying to come up with the equation, if we look at where it crosses our y-axis, that's at a -1. So we know in our equation we're going to have -1 at the end there. Then the other thing it gives us besides the y-intercept is the slope, which is our number in front of x. So whatever number is in front of x is our slope or our rise over run. So how much it's going up or down over how much it's going left or right. So if we're looking at our example here and we find 2 points that it goes through, obviously it goes through at -1 there, but then it also goes through at that 4, 0. So if we're going up 1 and to the right 4, that would be a slope of 1/4 or 1/4. And then remember that slope goes in front of x. So the equation for that graph below in slope-intercept form is going to be y equals 1/4 x minus 1. All right, if it was going through a +1, then it would be +1. So let's use that to then, for this second example, we're given the equation and we are going to graph it. All right, so you might have noticed with that last one, we can always start with our starting point, which is always going to be that y-intercept. That will always give you your first point on your graph. So in our example here, our y-intercept is -3, so we're going to put our first point on our y-axis at -3. Then from there, to find your next point or points, you're going to use your slope, the number in front of x, which ours is -3, which any whole number is just over 1. So since it's a -3, we are going to go down 3 to the right 1, or you could also go up 3 to the left 1. All right, I can't go down and to the left because that would be a double negative, which would make it positive. So you're either going down and to the right or up and to the left. All right, once you have a few points, you can go ahead and use your ruler to connect those and get your straight line. The second form we're going to look at is point slope. So this time, again, they're giving us the slope, but instead of the y-intercept, they're giving us a point on that line. All right, so that x1, so the x minus whatever that x is going to be your x coordinate of the point, and then y minus whatever that y value is going to be the y coordinate of that point. So if you're trying to come up with the graph, that would be your starting point instead of the y-intercept for this one. And then again, using that slope to find any of the following points, right? Which remember your slope is your rise over run. So once you have your first coordinate, you can just use that to find any following coordinates. All right, so looking at our examples here, they want us to come up with the equation given this information. So it's y minus, and since our y is a -2, minus a negative is going to become +2. Then we have our slope being multiplied onto x minus our x coordinate, which is a +2, so it's going to stay -2. All right, looking at our second example, we're going to do the same thing, and then we're going to show how you could take that equation and graph it. All right, so this time it's going through a -1, -2, so minus a -2 is going to become +2. Our slope is 3/2, and then x minus a -1 is going to become +1. So if we were just given this equation, y plus 2 equals 3/2 x plus 1, this is how we could take that and then graph it. So instead of starting with your y-intercept, you're going to start with your xy coordinates. And since it's +1 and it's supposed to be a negative, we know both of those x and y coordinates are going to be negative. So once I find that coordinate pair, I can go ahead and graph that. So I graphed at -1, -2. And then just like before, you're going to use your slope. So going up 3 to the right 2 since it's positive, or down 3 to the left 2 because that double negative would make it positive as well. All right, so our slope should be increasing since it's a positive slope, and then just use your ruler to connect and draw your line. And lastly, we have standard form, which is just a number x plus a number y equals a number. So like this example here. Standard form is great for just finding the x and y intercepts super quick, right? Because when you set x equal to 0, that means it's going to be crossing your y-axis. So you can set x equal to 0, get your y-intercept, and then similarly, you can set y equal to 0, and that will get you your x-intercept, because you think if it's crossing that x line, that means my y can't be up or down at all, it's got to be at 0. All right, so using this example to find that, if I set my x equal to 0, that's just going to go away, and I'm just going to be left with negative 3y equals a negative 15. Now it's just a one-step equation. Divide both sides by negative 3 to get that we have a y-intercept at positive 5. You can then plot that on your graph. So where our y-axis is, so on our y-line, it's going to go through a positive 5. We can do the exact same thing, well, not exact same, slightly different, to find our x-intercept. So instead of setting our x equal to 0, we're going to set our y equal to 0, right? Anything times 0 is just going to make that become 0. That's going to go away, and we're going to be left with just 10x equals negative 15. So just like before, it's just a one-step equation. We can divide both sides by 10 to get that our x is a negative 1.5. Then we can graph that. So on our x line, on our x-axis, we're going to go between negative 1 and negative 2 and plot our point at negative 1.5. Then just use your ruler to connect those 2 points and draw your line. You really only need 2 points ever to be able to come up with your graph, right? Because then you can just use a ruler to make sure it's straight, and it should be going through all the correct points. So a little shortcut for this, since we're plugging in 0 for x with our y-intercept, is to find your y-intercept, you're just going to take that c value, whatever it equals, divided by b, so whatever number is in front of your y, and that is going to get you your y-intercept. So to find your y-intercept, just take c divided by b. Similarly, for your x-intercept, since we'd be setting y equal to 0, you're just going to take whatever your c value is divided by whatever's in front of x, so a, and that will find you your x-intercept. Just divide c by a, and that gets you where it crosses your x line. So just a little quick recap of these 3 forms here. Remember that number in front of x is your slope. So this is going to be your rise over run. Once you have your first point, it's going to tell you how much to go up and over. With slope-intercept, your first point is going to be that constant, that number by itself, your b, and that is going to be where it crosses the y-axis. So you're going to find that y-line and then put your first point where it crosses, and then use your slope to find the next points. Similarly, with point slope, instead of giving you the y-intercept, your first point is going to be that xy coordinate. So your x1 and your y1, that will give you your first point. Remember, in this form, it is supposed to be minus your x and minus your y. So that means if it's plus your x or plus your y, it must be a negative number. Then from there, you're going to use your slope, your rise over run, to find any next points. And lastly, we have our standard form, which if we set x equal to 0, that's going to find our y-intercept. So we would just take c divided by b, the number in front of our y, to then get our y-intercept. Similarly, if we set y equal to 0, that's going to get us our x-intercept. So we can take that number in front of x, a, and take our c divided by that a. And you need a minimum of 2 points to make a line, so that's really all you need. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future videos from me.